I will tell you up front, I am a klutz. Do not let the appearance fool you. I do the stupidest things. You cannot even. I'll give you a sample. You know how when your lips are chapped, you take chapstick and you go, it feels so good that you knock it off your ear. Or you take, it has cocoa butter in it, so you kind of, well, at least I do. I put it up in here and it feels, anything that'll help the lines will work. But I'm in Costco, and I'm headed over to the pharmacy, and I grab my chapstick, and I did my smearing, and I get over there, and I got to tell you, the people were really nice. They let me go to the head of the line. I got my prescription, go back to my girlfriend, and she goes, "What is with your face?" You guessed it, long-wearing red lipstick. Those people were not being nice. They thought Chucky the Clown had come to life. They were pretty terrified. But I brought for you to see, I'm not the only one who does dumb things. I have a few things that I wanted you to see. Would you do my first PowerPoint? If you can't see it, we can turn the light off. Can you see over me? Mm-hmm. Am I gone? That's for the macho guys. And this one. Oh. I have to tell you, one of my books, Be of Good Cheer, is a lot of my embarrassing moments made into Bible lessons. And so, but I found a more embarrassing moment that's worse than what I did. It's a little grainy because it's from the Lawrence Welk show many, many years ago, but you'll get the point.
Lady over there, come over here, young lady. Tell the folks your name, please.
I'm Janice Keurig.
And you're from where, Janice?
From Ontario, California.
And tell me something. What would you like to do on the stage? I have an idea. You want to dance with Bobby, don't you?
No, I'd rather dance with you.
Really? Bobby, you may hold the baton. Okay.
And one, and two, and...
She's the school teacher. I have to hold her glasses. Okay. Now.
One, and two.
What did you say your name was? Janice? Janice, let me just tell you one thing. In this band, I do the leading. Now, we'll try that once more, huh? Okay, Myron, once more. Will you take it easy? Huh? Come over here, please. Okay, once more. Now, I'll do the leading. You just stand here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This girl is too wild for me. Bobby, you dance with her.
done some embarrassing things, but that definitely tops it all. And I have to tell you, I'm always on a diet, always on a diet. And someone told me about, and I've tried every diet possible, and this friend of mine told me about an egg diet. All you eat are eggs. Nobody told me they couldn't be Cadbury. I actually did find something better than a diet. I grew my hair. People kept saying, "Did you lose weight?" I said, "No, I grew my hair." It seems the more hair you have on your head, the smaller your fanny appears. Amen. I noticed Erin grew hers, but I don't think she has that problem. And I did break down. I went to the doctor, and I don't know about you, but my doctor has the scale, like right when you walk through the door, so you're kind of out in the front of everybody, and she wants me to get on the scale, and I took my coat off, and I took my sweater off, and I took my shoes off, and I blew my nose. And she says, "Well, how much do you weigh?" And I said, "Well, I weigh about 160. And I get on the scale, and she says, "No, you weigh 180. She said, "How tall are you?" Because she was going to measure me. And I said, "Well, I'm 5'7". And she said, "Well, actually, you're only 5'6". So she took my blood pressure, and she said, "Your blood pressure is pretty high." I said, "Well, what do you expect? I walked in here tall and slender, and now I find out I'm short and fat." And women who carry a little weight, a little extra weight, tend to live longer than their husbands that mention it. I have a video. It's number 3. Don't forget me there. This is me.
Can you get one, Mike?
I love that. I love that. You might as well show them the next one, too, because this is how I feel also. I can actually do that with chocolate. Actually, I love chocolate. I love it. I can't help it. My kids were actually 6 before they realized that chocolate Easter bunnies were supposed to have ears. And I love See's candy. Yeah, I can pretty much tell you what's in every piece by the top, right? I can see people, yes. Aren't we the great ones? Well, I had a man one time gave our family a 5-pound box of See's candy. And back then, they cost $60. I mean, well, it was evening. I took it home, put it on my counter. I go to bed. I got up the next morning, and there was a row of ants. It was sitting by the door. It came in. They walked all the way around the kitchen, came back down into my box of See's candy. I did what any person would do. I put it in the sink. I washed it off and put them in the freezer. Long after that, actually, I was sitting there and I was watching TV, and it was actually the first Gulf War, and it's kind of the first time they had news like that. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is it. This is Armageddon, right? I'm going, hey, I'm going out fat. I went out and grabbed a box of See's candy. I ate the whole entire thing, a whole pound, and I thought, now I don't know scientifically how this works. You eat a pound of See's candy, you gain 6 pounds. How does that work? The good news is it was not Armageddon. The bad news, I'm still growing my hair. And I have to admit, I am over the hill. I am. 70 is in reaching distance, real close. And there's something about getting older, though. Women, you'll understand this. We kind of become invisible to guys. You notice that? It's like they look right through you. Well, except the other day, this guy was checking me out. He would not take his eyes off me. Well, at least till he tripped over his walker anyway. But there is one thing I'm going to ask God about. Hot flashes. Come on. I think when Paul talks about the thorn in the flesh, He's talking about hot flashes because he says it comes from the pit of hell, right? Right. But come on, we go through 30 to 40 years of PMS, pregnancy, childbirth, swollen hands, swollen feet, swollen everything. And now we get to top it off with hot flashes? I think the men should have at least gotten the hot flashes. Come on. All they get is their hair kind of migrates from here to other weird parts of their body. After 18 years of hot flashes, I would change places with any man and shave my ears. And I broke down. I went to the doctor, and he had me fill out a questionnaire. It said, "Are you irritable?" I put, "No, jerk." For some reason, he thought I needed hormones. He was going to put me on Premarin. You know what Premarin is. For the younger ladies, pregnant mare urine? Really? I mean, I admit I have a deranged mind. But who came up with that? Some old farmer is out with his horse going, "My wife's been so crabby lately, I don't know what to do." Maybe that'll help. What? Oh, and I have to tell you also, I have one more slide there, slide number 5. This is one thing good out of hot flashes. I live in the snow country. I guess maybe I have to appreciate it to, yeah, okay. And I am a terrible cook. I admit it up front. I burn everything. Show that slide. I went to grill some vegetables. That is my pan. That was me. And I did this while I was watching Worst Cooks in America. Seriously. I love that show. Someone's worse than I am. And, my kids, grace around my house pretty much sounds like, "God, please do something with this." I can't help it. I burn everything. The family says I do not give them meals. I give them burnt offerings. But I told the kids, I said, it could be a whole lot worse because I found this cookbook and I could be cooking with poo. My kids learned very early age that you could always get good food in church, right? Fellowships, nothing like it. They always have me bring rolls, by the way. That's where I think they got, my last name is Kaiser Rolls. I think it just goes. But they always found out they could get good food there. But this kindergarten teacher told her kids to bring in something that signified their religion. The next day, this little girl stands up and says, "Well, I'm Jewish, and this is a Star of David." And a little boy stood up and said, "Well, I'm Catholic, and this is a crucifix." Another little girl stood up and said, "Well, I'm Baptist, and this is a casserole." And I want to leave you with this one. My mother was a very funny lady. In the 60s, 70s, she got her hair done once a week. Where her hair was short, and she would go and she would get it washed and set and dried and sprayed till it was pretty much bulletproof because she had to keep it till the next week, right? So when my mother went to bed, this is what my mother did. And you guys, your mother did it too, right? This is what my mom did. She wrapped her hair up because she wanted to keep it, at night. But my mother went a step farther. She really wanted to keep it. So this is what she did. I am not making this up. I couldn't make this up. I figured it worked well on 2 counts. It kept her hair in place and doubled as birth control. Oh, my. I really pray about each program I do. And I have to tell you, I do not cookie cutter it, and that's why I use my notes, because I feel that God has given me something to say to you. And not only do I do it because I don't want to miss anything he said, sometimes I'll go off on a rabbit trail somewhere, and I don't want to do that. So please excuse me, I am using my notes for most of this, but it's because God gave me this for you, okay? So that's why. And one of the things he said to me, I know that the theme is sent, but I really felt God clearly say, you know what, before you can be sent, you have to be okay. Because you can't send someone who can't swim into the ocean to save somebody, right? You have to be in a good place yourself. So tonight, we're going to start with you. Because I bet if I said, how many people are hurting right now, the majority of you would raise your hand. Is there something going on in your life? Like Aaron prayed, trying to leave baggage behind. The thing is, you go home, you're still going to have it. So we're going to work on it from another angle is what we're going to do. Our society is totally engulfed in polls. They take polls for everything. And I brought a few of them to read to you. Do you know that 81% of all teenage girls pick their own deodorant? Why they asked, I have no idea. 33% of adults think it's a great way to spend the evening watching primetime TV. That explains a lot. 20% of adults would rather have a tooth pulled than have their car worked on by a mechanic. Yeah. 2% of adults believe that taxes are too low. 1% of adults read their Bible more than once a day. And as I said, if I were to ask you who's going through something, who's got the baggage at home that you know you have to go to and it's in your head, you know, we would probably all raise our hands if we're being honest about it. But I wish I could tell you I could change that with a snap of a finger, but I can't. But what I can do is give you some encouragement. I love Isaiah 43, 1 through 4 and a little bit of 5, and it says, "Fear not, I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters," wherever that group was, "I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. When you walk through the fire, I will be with you. The flames will not set you ablaze. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. And since you are precious and honored in my sight, and because I love you, fear not, I am with you." What an incredible promise that is. You notice he did not say, when you go to the waters, I'm going to build a bridge. And he did not say, when you go to the waters, I'm giving you floods or floaties to make it over. He did not say, when you walk through the fire, I'm sending the firemen and a fire extinguisher. Instead, he said, I will be with you. I will be with you. And that promise is only worth something if you can trust the promise giver, right? A lot of us have had promises that are broken. People in our lives, maybe we've broken some promises. But we have a promise from God, and he keeps it. That's what's so wonderful about it. He can be trusted. Sometimes we feel like we're trapped between the devil and the deep blue sea or even the Red Sea. And I want us to see what God's word has to say. In Matthew 14, 15 through 32, and you probably know this story. I'm just hoping that I can give you maybe another little view of it. If you don't have a Bible, there are Bibles back there. And there is also, I believe they're written in your booklet. Matthew 14, 15. As evening approached, the disciples came to him. This is a remote place, and it is already late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy some food. Jesus replied, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. We have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. Bring them here to me, he said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. Immediately, he made the disciples go into his boat and on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up to the mountainside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves and the wind against it. And during the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said, take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come out on the water. And of course, Jesus says, come. Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, caught him, and said, you have little faith. Why do you doubt? And they climbed in the boat, and the wind died down. Then those in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. And I know this is a story we tell our kids, and I know it's one you've probably heard before, but there's some other parts to it that I think as adults we need to look at. Now, Jesus tells them, first of all, he starts with very limited resources, right? He's got a little boy's lunch, just not much to deal with. And he fed 5,000 men, which probably meant 5,000 women and maybe 10,000 kids. He could have fed as many as 20,000 people at that time. But if you notice in verse 19, between the blessing and the giving, there was a breaking. The bread had to be broken. You may think, I don't have much. I don't have much in the way of talents. But you know, in God's hands, a little bit goes a very long way. If you will let him bless you and break you, and you're thinking, what? Break? Where did that come in? I don't mind being used, but I don't want pain. Isn't that what we think? But think about Mary with the alabaster box. She went to Jesus and she was going to anoint him with that beautiful perfume. The box had to be broken before it could be a blessing. Or if you think of Gideon with 300 men and torches, and they went against the Midianites, and they stood around the camp, and on the sound of the trumpet, they actually broke the clay pots, and the light came forward. And if you read that account, they actually were able to beat the Midianites, and they were way outnumbered. But it took breaking. People say they want to be used in ministry. You know, God has been good to me. I can be used, but I don't want any pain. I don't want any misery. But the answer is, before God can actually use a person greatly, he has to be broken. There's just no other way, because you see, pride has to go. Self-sufficiency has to go. All of that has to go so you can make way for compassion and tenderness. And I know this sounds tough. And some of you might have heard my story with my son. If you have, just bear with me, because I know there's a lot that haven't. My husband and I, when we first married, we could not have children. Could not have children. I tried everything. I took my temperature every day. I took fertility pills. I had those horrible tests that are done in the hospital by a lab technician. If you ever had any modesty, forget it, because people are walking in and out. You are not in a ladylike position. I had a janitor buffing the floor. And I begged, and I begged, and I begged, and I begged God for a baby during this time. Well, I'm here to tell you, God has a sense of humor. Because we found the cure for infertility. It was called debt. We bought a house, put in a pool, and I was pregnant for 6 straight years. And I have to tell you, my first son, Jared, was actually born the day before my 30th birthday. And when I was 30, I hung around with a couple of girls. We had become Christians together. We worked together, and I was the youngest of the 3. When we turned 30, we did terrible things to each other. Like, it was rumored that I was responsible for throwing a surprise wake at her house where the centerpiece was a 6-foot coffin. It was also rumored that I was responsible for having the other one picked up by wheelchair and ambulance. So they were going to get me good. But I was in the hospital having my son. They come up and they're dressed in black mourning clothes. They brought me dead black flowers. They brought me black balloons. They covered my bed in black crepe paper. The nurses are mortified. They did not realize it was my 30th birthday. What I didn't know at that time is my son was seriously ill. And we did not find out till that night that he was in deep trauma. And the one thing you never want to see is now back then you'd walk up to this window, and I could not find my son. But in the back, I could see a bunch of doctors and nurses around the child, which was mine. And by that night, we found out there was something wrong with his heart. And so they called a special team of doctors out of San Francisco. We lived in Stockton at the time. And that's how they picked him up. There wasn't the Metaflight thing back then. They took him, and Bill and I followed in the ambulance down to San Francisco. And while we're sitting there, of course, we're praying like crazy because all I could think is, how am I going to go home how do I go home to a baby's room without the baby? How can I do that? And it was just torture. And I remember Dr. Zarnicki, they did a catheterization on him, and Dr. Zarnicki came down and he said, Jared is dying. We are just going to try something. Jared was born without the aortic arch, which is the little vessel that carries all the oxygenated blood out to the rest of the body. And so his organs were all shutting down because they had no oxygenated blood. And Dr. Zarnicki said, we're just going to try something. And about a year before this, Bill and I were brand new baby Christians, and we had a Hawaii trip docked in our lap that we went to. And while we were there, we met a couple that were dynamic Christians. They loved Jesus so much. And we were so hungry to get to know this Jesus that we literally spent the last 3 days with them. We get home, and they lived in Ohio, we're in California, and we kept in touch. So they found out when I finally got pregnant. And that morning we called. Dick had gone out to start his car. His car wouldn't start. He did not scream, yell, kick the tires, and call 3A. He went in and said, God must want us here for a reason this morning. By the way, he was an attorney with the 700 Club. He did not drive a junker by any means. So that morning we called them, and they prayed with us over Jared. And about 4.5 hours later, Dr. Zarnicki came down, and the best I can say is he was smiling ear to ear. He said, I have never had a surgery go so well, ever. Jared became the first child on record to survive the surgery he had. Praise God. And he was only in the hospital 2 weeks. He was in the intensive care unit 1 week, and he was in a regular room 1 week. And the night before we got to take him home, Dr. Popper, the pediatric cardiologist, called us in, and he drew everything out, and he said, we have no idea what to expect. You have to count his breathing. You have to watch for distress. You have to see if he's sweating, anything. They did not know what to expect. And the one thing he said I'll never forget, he said, I can give you 100 reasons why that baby should have died. I can't give you one why he lived. Needless to say, we told him. Jared, who is now 38, just last year went back. They called him from San Francisco. They wanted to keep track of him. And he went back to see, and Dr. Popper came out of retirement to see Jared. It was awesome. What really blessed my heart is Dr. Popper said, you be sure and tell your mother that I have kept all of her letters and all of her pictures. As Jared was growing up, I would send letters to both he and the surgeon and say, this is what God did through you. And he said he kept that. And that just meant so much to me that God used that. We were broken. We were completely, absolutely broken. What should have been the happiest day of my life was probably the most terrifying I've ever been in my life. I just remember saying over and over, God, how am I going to go home? How am I going to go home to that room? How can I? And I remember hearing God's voice, and he said, only with me. And I know that was true. So anyway, to get back to my story, Jesus sends his disciples into the Sea of Galilee in the storm. It's funny, they says they were troubled. Well, they thought they were going to die because the story back then is if you saw a ghost, you were going to die. That's what the fishermen thought. And so they're terrified. But remember, Jesus sent them into the storm, didn't he? He said, you go. I'll catch up later. I don't know how they figured he was going to do it. But during this time, it also says that Jesus was up on the mountain praying, and his eyes were on them. He saw them in the storm, and they're out there paddling, probably 3 ways forward and 12 ways back. And, the boat's being tossed. The Sea of Galilee is known for having sudden storms like that. And, they're probably seasick. Who knows? They're being thrown back and forth. Now, they have already seen Jesus in another storm, calm it. They have seen Jesus feed maybe 20,000 people just a few minutes before. They saw him heal the sick, raise the dead. They've been with him long enough. They have seen it. But the Bible says they didn't understand. They didn't get it. And what's amazing is they never even thought to say, I wish Jesus was here to help us paddle. Of all things, they didn't get it. They were terrified, and I love what one version of this says in another way. When Jesus goes walking out to them, which I can imagine he's humming for a midnight stroll going, man, I love you, don't you know? But it says, be of good cheer. I thought, what a great title for a book. But then Peter sees him, and you know Peter's the foot in the mouth guy, and Peter says, I want to come out to you. And you know the rest of the story. And there's a lot of literature about Peter, extra besides the Bible, that says he was a big guy. He wasn't a little guy, he was a big man. And yet Jesus just kind of reaches down, picks him up, and plops him back in the boat, which is amazing. You know, we see pictures of Jesus, and he looks kind of like my arms, kind of flabby and, you know, wimpy, and I don't know, maybe Pee Wee Herman, when actually it ought to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know, he worked with lumber. He drug lumber around and things like that. It should have been, I'll be back. Thank God he'll be back. And if, you know, also like the Jews in Exodus, again, God told them exactly where they were to camp. And it was between two huge mountains and the Red Sea. And they probably looked at that and went, boy, this is not very smart because we are hemmed in, right? You know, strategically that would not be the place, but God told them to camp there. And they're high-fiving and happy, and all of a sudden they hear a noise, a lot of noise. And they turn around and there's 600 chariots coming at them, the Egyptians. And they had their eyes on them, and what they needed to do was raise their eyes just a little bit higher and look at what the answer was as opposed to what the problem was. I love what Jeremiah says. He says, God will make a way when there is no other way. And the Egyptians learned who the God of the Jews really was. So the storm was calmed, and they finally looked at Jesus and said, wow, you truly are the Son of God. Spiritually, we come into storms usually for two reasons. One is a storm of correction. Ask Jonah about that one. And another one, the second one, is to develop us. You know, we have storms in our lives, and it is to develop us. And I can tell you what I went through with Jared developed me. I became such a stronger Christian because I knew Jesus was next to me every minute of every day that I was in that hospital with him. There was never a doubt in my mind. And if you ask other Christians that have been through tragedies, they'll say, God was right next to me. Because it's amazing what we do. You know, a lot of times when life is just going so easy, we go, oh, thank you, Lord, for this day. But you let tragedy strike, and you hit your knees about in the hall, and you slide all the way into the bedroom going, Lord, I need you. I knew that God was with me every minute of every day. Yeah, we have to be broken, and we have to be at the end of our rope. We have to know that we cannot do anything about the situation because that's when God steps in. He has a plan. He is faithful, and his plan is always so much better than anything. And I know there's many times we don't know it, and there's many questions we're going to ask when we stand in front of him as to why things happen. But he has a plan. And it made me think of Mary. You know, Mary knew where that baby came from. She knew that that was a miracle. She spoke to the angel. She knew that he was Messiah, right? And when he was born, I'm sure she kissed those little feet like we do, you know, and helped him learn to walk and helped him learn to feed himself and dress himself and watch him grow up and be this amazing, amazing man. And then saw him beaten and saw him stripped and the crown of thorns beaten into his head and hung on a cross. And I always think, what would she have felt? What would it have felt like to have been Mary and be at that foot of that cross and look up at those feet that you kissed, and now they're covered in blood. And now She had to have said, God, what is going on? This is my promised child. This is the Messiah. What are you doing? Get him off. Save him. How can this be? How can this be? But little did she know, as he was laid into a tomb, and the tomb was covered up and sealed. She had to, being a mother, I can't even imagine how terrible that is, what that would be like. Especially knowing your child is the Messiah and he's hanging on a cross. They killed him for nothing. But see, God had a better plan. And she didn't even know that. God had the way for all of us to be saved, every single one of us. If he had not done that, if he had not gone to the cross, if the angels had gotten him off, we would be dead in our sin. You've got to look at that. You know what? We have a God that loves us so much that he says, I will be with you. It's true he sends us into a storm, but he certainly sent himself into one. It's not anything he's not done to himself as well or allowed to himself to go through. He says, I will be with you because you are cherished. Oh my gosh, he cherishes us. And he loves us that much. So when we're in those storms, you know what? Ask him in the boat. If you read that account in some of the other Gospels, it's Matthew, I think it says that they're willing to, or John for sure, they're willing to take him into the boat. Really, ask Jesus into the boat. That's where you got to start. But no, there is a purpose for our pain. There is. But only if you turn it over to him. You've got to give it to the Lord. You don't want to suffer by yourself with it. You can. We all have. But the truth is, God says, I am with you in the middle of it. And that's my promise. He takes that darkness. He takes the garbage in our life, the blackness, the incredible blackness. And you know what he does? He goes, I'm going to turn it to beauty. And that's what he does for us. I can take that horrible, horrible pain and I can turn it into beauty for you. God says, you are precious and honored in my sight, and because I love you, I am with you. Let me pray for you, okay? Jesus, I know that we just have hurts. That's life. The biggest lie I know is, come be a Christian and you're never going to have a problem. And that is so not true. But the difference is, Lord, with you, it's possible. With you, everything is possible. You make a way when there seems no other way. I pray that for each woman here right now, Lord. I know that there are some that are really hurting because you wanted this spoken. And I just pray that you take my words and you make them right, because I know I probably have messed up along the way, but God, you make it right into each woman's heart so that they know when they are facing unbearable things, that you, God, can make it right, and you can take the garbage and turn it to something beautiful. Thank you for this time. Thank you for each and every precious woman you brought here, Lord. My prayer was you would bring those who needed to hear this. And I am overwhelmed, Lord, that you could even use me for anything good. And I thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to use your words. God, as we go out this night, may this rest of this beautiful evening with each other, of fellowship and laughter, and just rest from any problems from home. In your precious name, God, amen.